Dear students, today we will have a session on rural infrastructure, its overview and issues. In this session, we will discuss about definition, the concept of infrastructure, the components of infrastructures, what are the costs involved, what are the benefits involved, which agencies are implementing, and what are the main components which are lacking or they need attention in India. So we will go by definition first, and definition wise, like any other thing, infrastructure is basic things needed. Basic structure needed for doing anything is infrastructure, and rural development is nothing extra. Rural development means what is needed for developing a rural area. And we can understand that agriculture is one of the most important activity in rural area. So whatever is needed for crop production and agriculture is a basic component of infrastructure. Another thing, the items required for people living in rural area, maybe their health, maybe their education, all these things, they comprise rural infrastructure. In earlier days, the concept of infrastructure was only hard things like roads, godowns, then bridges. All these things were considered as infrastructure. Now the concept has been widened, and the soft components like health, education, communication, law and order, technical know-how, everything is considered as an infrastructure. But when we talk of rural infrastructure, there is difference between urban and rural areas. And difference is very wide. It is not a narrow difference. Now we will go point wise. If we consider the density of population, the density of population in urban areas is 16 times more than rural areas. Another thing is the overall population. Overall population in rural area is less than 300 persons per square kilometer. Then income level of rural people. The income level of rural people is much lesser than the income level of the urban people, and similarly the disposable portion of income is also different. In Indian scenario, the income of rural people and disposable income, they are very, very low. So these points, all these points have to be considered at the time of designing any infrastructure project. And how these points are important? Consider telecommunication. In urban areas, we can lay the telephone lines, we can lay cables, we can provide every type of thing. Because of density of population, lot of people will take connection and cost of this infrastructure will be covered. But in rural areas where density of population is very low, we need to provide something different. And wireless technology is considered to be one of the most viable solution in case of communication. Go for sanitation. In urban areas, we can provide sewer lines. For water supply, we can provide piped water. But in case of rural area, if we go for sewer lines, sewer line will not be effective at all, because discharge in a line will be much less, and all the waste will be accumulated in the line itself. It will not go for disposal. So individual septic tank, individual water point, they are the solutions in rural areas. Average size of human settlement, when it is less than 2000 persons, then every infrastructure component has to be designed with this consideration. If we consider the income level, The purchasing power, we have already discussed that rural people have much less disposable income. What does it implicate? It means that cost of services in rural areas should be planned in such a manner that people can afford it. And in case the same service provider is providing or government is providing, there is a need for cross subsidization of costs, so that the persons who can afford or who are using these infrastructure facilities as their income generation, they can pay more, and for those who are using these facilities as a lifeline, they can use these services as at low cost. So these are the points which planners have to consider at the time of planning. Now, there is a point, why invest in rural infrastructure? If the potential is not there or the income generation is low, why huge investment? Answers are there. There is huge potential which needs to be unlocked, both in terms of natural resources and human resources. Suppose brilliant student is there who has a lot of IQ, but school is not there, or road is not there, or electricity is not there, then he will not be able to thrive. So we can unlock the potential of natural and human resources at many places in Himalayas or other remote places. There are crops which are valued at very high rates, but if people are not able to sell these crops or transport their produce at the right time, they will rot. So whatever potential is available, it should be unlocked and it should be put to use, and for these purposes the infrastructure is a must. If we provide rural infrastructure, then productivity and efficiency of people will increase. With electricity connection, they can work for more time. After sunset, there is no light in rural area, so there will be no education, there will be no small scale industry, no household industries. So electricity will increase the productivity and efficiency, both the things. And people will have access to new services and new goods. When the communication is there, people will be able to travel to nearby towns, nearby areas, and they will know what are the services available, what are the goods available, how to use them, and they will also try to increase the level of income so that they can enjoy these services. The employment in rural areas is very seasonal. After agricultural operations are over, the people remain unemployed, and in case of rural infrastructure is available, they can serve for another things. They can produce another goods, they can produce another services for benefit of the country, and it will result in enhancement of GDP. Another thing is increase in standard of living. When people of rural areas will have access to new goods and services, their standard of living is going to increase, and when standard of living increases, their expectations will also increase. Thereby they will also try to be more productive, more earning than the present scenario. Now if we take a small example of an electric connection, what will be the benefit? First, irrigation. Irrigation can be provided to crops at lower prices if electrical pumps are used. Similarly, lights in household, light in every household, or even with 50% households will result in good education, extra working hours, extra productive hours, good entertainment facilities, and even running of telecom equipments depend on the electricity. The IT services, computer, all the things can be provided with electricity. Law and order situation will also be good if electricity is there, if power is there, then lighting will be there, roads will be lighted, and better law and order situation will be there. Similarly, working of hospitals, working of schools, everything will be improved with electricity. So there is no need to explain the infrastructure facilities which are required. Need is there and they are lifeline of the rural areas. Now we will go about projects, how the infrastructure projects are presently conceived. Most of the projects in rural areas which are financed by financial institutions or sometimes by government also, the emphasis is given on what is the cost benefit, and we apply a lot of mathematical tools to analyze the project. But now we are feeling that instead of going by this mechanical methods and calculating the financial benefits, we should go and search whether these projects are lifeline of the rural areas or they are just income generating projects. The rural road is a lifeline. The electricity connection is a lifeline to rural area. Whether it, in some cases, it may not prove to be beneficial on paper, but a small road of 0.5 kilometer, 1 kilometer or 1.5 kilometer will make lot of difference in life of the rural people. Maybe it is healthcare, higher education or any other thing. We have to see from social angle each and every project. We should not only consider the financial or economic angle at the time of analysis of a project. Now we will discuss something about design of projects. Design means overall expectation, overall investment, overall facilities which we need from a developed project, means post development stage what we will need. So at the time of design we have to consider the special aspects we have already discussed, means what is special about rural infrastructure projects than the urban projects. Sometimes small resources are allocated to these projects, maybe under employment guarantee scheme. Then what happens? Then low cost of material, low component goes to material cost, high component goes to labor cost, and thereby the economic life of the project is very low. Similarly, sometimes over-designed projects are provided due to political or other considerations. Sometimes we provide cold storage under a plan scheme, and later on we find that there are no takers and or there is no produce even to store in cold storage. Similarly, the unplanned growth. Unplanned growth always results in low or nil capacity utilization. Therefore, if we provide any project, maybe rural go down, maybe a road or maybe any other thing, we should first consider how much is required, what width of road is required, what capacity of rural go down is required. In-depth study will be required before making an investment so that all areas can be benefited and no investment goes without, no area goes without proper investment. Some of the components of rural infrastructure, they are irrigation, farm inputs, post-harvest, marketing, roads, bridges, energy. Energy may be electricity or it may be diesel or bioenergy, telecommunication. And if we go by soft components, means which do not have any material benefits, they will be education, health, access to technology, safety, banking network. All these are components of infrastructure which are necessary for a rural area. Now we will consider the implementing agencies. We will discuss about the agencies which are presently implementing rural infrastructure projects and non-traditional areas where now people are entering and they are providing infrastructure. We know that traditionally government is considered to be provider of infrastructure, financer of infrastructure, everything. Whenever we come across a bad road, a bad canal or no water in the canal or any other thing, we only blame government, because traditionally we think that the duty of providing infrastructure lies with government, and this is currently in Indian scenario it is correct. So now slowly and slowly this is changing. Government created various bodies like Rural Electrification Corporation, Central Warehousing Corporation, Food Corporation of India, Rural Engineering Services. In different states, different corporations and different bodies were created for the purpose of rural infrastructure. And finance also, innovative ways are being planned for providing this finance to the rural infrastructure. RIDF is one of the mode which has been used as a mode of finance to infrastructure projects, and RIDF funding is not coming directly from government budget. In fact, it is coming from the persons who are depositing their money to the bank, and in turn bank is financing, the bank is using these resources for financing and earning interest out of it, and some portion of this is to be used as a priority sector. Banks have to lend some portion of their deposits for priority sector lending, and the shortfall in the priority sector lending is always available, and now government is using that shortfall money for this infrastructure financing. The banks are depositing this shortfall money to NABARD, and NABARD is lending to state governments. This is the mode of finance of RIDF. We will discuss it in detail in other module. Now other organizations in private and public sector have also joined the provision of infrastructure in rural areas, like NGOs, banking sector, corporate bodies, private bodies, and even individuals. They are providing infrastructure. Some reform movements are there in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, and Uttaranchal also, where individuals have formed associations to provide infrastructure in irrigation, in land development, in forestry, and some multinationals like ITC, PepsiCo, and Cargill, they are also providing infrastructure, maybe for their own benefit, but in turn rural people are also benefited in this course. They are providing seeds, they are providing technology, and they are buying the produce also. So this scenario is going to change slowly. The other issue which is very important in development of infrastructure is scientific and planned approach. In earlier times, the rural area and the infrastructure was not given very emphasis which was required. So the projects were generally implemented under poverty alleviation or employment generation schemes. So some schemes were Kaam ke Badle Anaj Yojana or some drought relief schemes. In such schemes, the roads were built, some canals were also built, but the main emphasis was giving employment to the local people. During this process, the skilled labor was not used because employment was to be given to local people only. The component of material was less, more emphasis was on giving employment to people. So these investments slowly they have gone waste, and the infrastructure created by these investments have gone waste. Next issue was in these schemes was supervision. These small schemes were supervised by either local bodies or the Panchayati Raj institutions. They have no capacity or no technical know-how how to go about these. The planning was not proper, the place was not proper elevations and proper sections were not given in roads, and sometimes the roads were washed away even in a single rain. Inter-department coordination was not there. In some cases in Rajasthan, under drought relief funds, PHCs and school buildings were made, but later on teachers and doctors were not available for these PHCs or schools. Drainage was not completed in the roads. Roads were made without any drainage provision, and during rains these roads were washed away. We also know that lot of plantation drives were taken, but they were not backed by the watering arrangement, and the plantation done all the gone waste, dried, and money was not at all used for the purpose. So it is very important to plan these projects in scientific way and implement these projects in scientific way, and their supervision, the know-how, everything should be planned before putting money in the projects. Maintenance of already created infrastructure, it is another issue. We see dilapidated roads, we see the PHCs, school buildings, panchayat buildings with broken plaster, broken doors, no whitewashing, leaking roofs, everything is there. This is lack of maintenance funds. Infrastructure has been created under some or other scheme, but there were no funds for maintaining these infrastructures. Similarly, consumables and manpower was not provided, only buildings were made in case of some school, in case of hospital buildings especially. If manpower is not there, the hospital building is of no use. Sometimes manuals were made on the basis of some study and local materials were not used, or local material which was not at all useful was put to use without any knowledge. Some wrong stone, some raw stone or other things which were locally available but not suitable, they were used. So how to solve these problems? These problems can only be solved with proper planning and a coordinated approach among various departments who are dealing with rural infrastructure. And for supervision and for other things, we can always employ local people with local knowledge, retired people or retired ex-servicemen. Their services can be used for supervision in large areas so that these investments do not go waste. The next thing we will consider and cover is cost and benefit. What are the costs and benefits involved in a rural development or rural infrastructure project? Like every other project, the cost involved are civil work cost like buildings, roads, chimney or any other thing which has been constructed, water tanks. Then cost of consumables means running of this project, whatever consumables are required, maybe electricity, maybe diesel, maybe any other fuel, manpower required for running, and most important, cost of maintenance. All these things are required in a project. Then benefits from a project may be monetary or non-monetary. For the purpose of any project analysis, we go by monetary benefits. What will be benefit in crop production? What will be the increase in crop production? Maybe more intensity of crops, maybe number of crops will be more in case we provide irrigation. In case we provide new road, what will be saving on fuel? How much production will be added? How much cost will be reduced? How much wear and tear will be reduced? Now all these things can be quantified, but there are benefits which are non-monetary and those should also be considered at the time of any analysis or considering any project for this. So we have already discussed the importance and the present scenario of rural infrastructure projects in area. Now we will discuss point by point the components of rural infrastructure. First and foremost component of rural infrastructure is irrigation, because entire economy of rural area depend on irrigation, because agriculture is the main source of income of rural people, and irrigation is the basic requirement of any agriculture activity. Though most of the India is having monsoon type of rains, but artificial irrigation is needed in any of the area, because monsoon is not dependable source of irrigation, and many times it fails, sometimes it is delayed, sometimes it is heavy or less than required. So a dependable source of irrigation is always needed, and during ancient times also, the whatever form of government we had, maybe king or it may be uh, Britishers or it may be Mughals, every period we see that irrigation structures were developed and maintained by the government, and at macro level presently also the responsibility of providing irrigation structures is with the government. During British period, lot of canals were made, and after British period, we have more emphasis on minor and micro irrigation. But the importance of those canals and those structures is still there. Most of the canals are now more than 100-year-old, but they are serving, they are being more modernized, but they have contributed a lot in converting the entire north area into a fertile zone. Though the canal irrigation, dams, barrages all have issues, but their importance cannot be ignored. Macro level irrigation consists of these infrastructures like dams, like big barrages and canals. For any canal we require diversion structure, and it is provided generally in form of dams. They have their own issues, because water has to be transported from a long distance. Losses are there in canal bed. It increases water table in nearby areas. Environmental problems are there. People are displaced at the time of construction of dams. Lot of area is submerged. Lot of environmental problems are there. Wildlife is displaced. Drainage problems are there. So big irrigation projects have lot of disadvantages as compared to the small irrigation projects, but they have their own importance, because they can store the excess water, they can provide and divert water to areas where there is no rain, where there is no groundwater, like Rajasthan. So big irrigation projects, though they are losing the importance these days, but they have relevance, and their importance cannot be ignored totally. And for some areas, these are the only solutions. Big irrigation is the only solution in some areas where we don't have groundwater or we don't have rains. The another problem with big irrigation projects is security, because dams can play havoc. Dams can cause a lot of problems. They can wash out entire cities, entire habitat downstream in case of earthquake, or in case of enemy attacks. Nowadays, after considering various aspects of cost and benefit, the government is giving most emphasis on minor irrigation. Minor irrigation has lot of advantages, but the only problem is that it is not supported by any legislative framework which can be enforced. Going by benefits, before going to benefits, we will consider what are the components of minor irrigation. Tube wells, bore wells, Persian wheel, dug well, traditional dug well, then tanks. They are all parts of minor irrigation. They provide quick benefits. We can drill a tube well in 3 or 4 days and start getting water. They are not long gestation projects like major irrigation projects. They supply water whenever we need. Farmer has not to wait for night or wait for his turn for getting canal water. And at present, 60% of the irrigated land is served by minor irrigation. But minor irrigation sector has some issues. One is use of power. It requires electrical or diesel energy, so it adds to cost. It adds to pollution in rural areas, and most serious problem is dangerous levels of the groundwater table. The table is declining day by day in entire North India and also at some places in South India. This is happening because we do not have any corresponding recharge arrangement for water. Only we are drawing water. And irrigation is not the only sector which is using groundwater. The cities, towns, industries, everybody is using groundwater. And most of the blocks in country are going dark because they do not have any corresponding rainwater harvesting or recharge or any traditional method for recharging the water which we are taking from the ground. Another methods which can save water are micro irrigation methods. Micro irrigation methods can prove very useful in the present scenario when water is becoming scarce, because they provide irrigation at very low water usage. The water requirement in micro irrigation is very less and the productivity is very high as compared to the normal flooding or any other thing, and the water loss in transportation is very low, almost negligible. But only issue is capital cost. The capital cost involved in micro irrigation projects is much higher, but it can be subsidized because of advantages with micro irrigation, and it should be popularized. Drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigation are two methods in micro irrigation, and we will go in detail in the other module. And now going back to MI schemes are mostly run by individuals. Only few deep tube wells are financed and maintained by government, and tube well corporations are doing this job. But it was a early day things, and now most of the people in rural areas, they who can afford taking a loan, they have developed their own minor irrigation structures. And best thing is the loans are available for creating minor irrigation projects. All the banks, rural banks, every financing institution is providing loan for this tube well, bore well or any other thing. So it is popular, but there is a need to supplement the minor irrigation with water recharge and other water harvesting techniques, so that the depleting groundwater table should not become a problem and our tube wells may not require deep boring again and again. So another sector we will discuss, that is rural roads. Rural roads are most important and they give all indirect benefits. There is no direct benefit from rural road and which can be calculated in terms of money directly, like irrigation. Rural road will provide all indirect benefits, so we have to consider indirect benefits at the time of calculating road, at the time of calculating any benefit or any benefit analysis ratio. And so another thing is, it is a social and economic investment. How it is social and economic investment? Because it increases social and economic activities in rural areas. If there is a good road, people can travel, they can mingle with each other, they can go to other places easily, the children can go to school and needy persons can go to hospitals in a short time. So it is considered as a social investment. And from economic point of view, it is very important because these roads are considered as arteries. Once people produce, import or any other thing cannot move from one place to another place, there will be no development. Roads as important in urban infrastructure, equally important they are in rural infrastructure. They result in increase in productivity for both sectors, farm sector and non-farm sector. Farm sector, people get inputs in correct time with less loss. They can sell their produce quickly whenever required. There will be low wear and tear in their vehicles, their cars. They can go to any place to sell their produce. In non-farm activities also, the people can come to village, they can order the things, they can purchase the things, they can get the required items from rural areas, because urban areas also depend on rural areas for some of the inputs. Then maybe milk. A milk collection center cannot run without good roads in the nearby areas, and surplus milk is utilized only in urban areas. So good roads are not only good for agriculture, but they are also required for non-farm sector development and process industries, because process industries are dependent on rural areas for the inputs. So many studies have been commenced and studies concluded that every investment in roads, they result in lifting the people from above poverty lines. Roads provide lot of indirect employment and lot of indirect benefits to the people, even those who are not living in the rural area but nearby areas. There are several issues related to rural roads, because quality construction cannot be ensured in rural areas because of the low connectivity, higher distances and low density of the population. People require a lot of time to reach remote villages, and the agencies who construct, they generally go after the construction, and without any quality control the payments are made. So other issues are there, like drainage. because most of the roads are constructed without any side drainage. And in fact, if drainage is not there, the life of the road or this investment on the road, it goes to drain. Whatever is constructed, it is wasted during monsoon season. Then important issue in Indian scenario is due to carts. The iron wheels are provided on the carts, and in some areas these carts are still used for marketing produce or transporting of goods, and the point load given by these carts, they damage the road on the day one of construction. So people should be educated to use rubber tires instead of carts. This is one of the important factors in rural roads. Funds were earlier considered as a major drawback, but nowadays government is giving a lot of emphasis to rural roads, and funds are available in RIDF, in PMGRY, Bharat Nirman, and every window is open for providing rural roads. And there is dearth of agencies for constructing. There is no dearth of works or the funds for the construction of rural roads. The one issue which we have already discussed was unskilled persons in the construction of roads, which were constructed or being constructed in poverty alleviation programs. It may be any program, or it may be Narega in the present scenario, where local people are to be employed, and local people may not be skilled enough to construct a good road because it requires proper training, proper equipment. So these programs, whenever they mean for construction of road, they should consider this aspect, and they should go for another areas, not roads, for these employment generation schemes, because roads require special know-how and technology for construction, otherwise their life will be very less. After considering lot of problems, lot of issues related to rural roads, the government has now devised a new program which is known as Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, and it is running in most of the Indian villages and providing connectivity to rural areas. Now the last thing which is required is policy framework for maintenance of rural roads and their permanent drainage structures, so that the investment should not go waste and it should last long. Electricity supply or energy requirements, they are the another sector which are important to rural areas. The rural electrification was not considered at all after independence, and rural areas near any town or big city, they were electrified, and most of the rural habitats were left unelectrified after independence. And first time when we needed food, and we felt that self-reliance on food front is a must, and it is necessary than any other thing. At that time, rural electrification projects were first time given importance. But at that time also, our main aim was to provide electricity to the farms and tube wells and not to the rural people. Because capital expenditure and transmission losses were considered as the negative factors in rural electrification. And the definition of electrified village was very simple. If there is one pole in rural area and it is connected to a grid, the village was considered to be electrified. And most of the connections were given to tube wells, and the people in the rural area were not using electricity for any other purpose. In the modern time, need was felt that electricity should be provided to each and every household of the rural area. and under various programs and especially under Bharat Nirman and Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana was also planned, and now emphasis is there for rural electrification, and Rural Electrification Corporation has been strengthened to provide electricity to each and every habitat in the rural area. Importance of the electricity, we have already explained that what are the important benefits we will get from electrification of rural area. It is not to be repeated now. And at present, if we take the statistics, only 44% households in India, they are electrified, but they are not getting regular electricity supply, and generally electricity is available only during night hours when the cities do not require electricity. After passing of Electricity Act, now this sector can be revolutionized because independent power plants can be provided, and independent power generation sources can provide electricity to rural areas at low cost and low transmission cost at low capital investment. The issues related to electricity in rural, remote and hilly areas can also be sorted out with the new technology or non-conventional energies like wind energy, solar energy, or mini or micro hydel plants as a substitute to grid power. And these things will be discussed in detail in another session, so it is not discussed in detail here. And there is a need for research and development in this area because we want to electrify all the villages by 2015, and it cannot be done without proper R&D. With the present technology, it seems to be almost impossible or difficult. So lot of investment is needed in R&D in this sector so that remote villages and each and every area is electrified. Next issue which we discuss, it is drinking water and sanitation. Drinking water need, there is no need for justifying that why drinking water is important. It is important to everybody, each and every human being, whether rural or urban. So we should not discuss. Need is there. Only thing is there how to supply safe drinking water to everybody. Now, at present, what we use in rural areas, most of us we know that hand pumps are the only source which are supplying water in the rural areas, and in the states like Kerala, where population density of villages is very high, in that state some overhead tanks have been made and piped water supply is being given. In areas like Rajasthan, where hand pumps are not possible, water is being supplied to a common point and people are drawing water from that common point. And the most important issue about water supply is that girls and women are the most affected parties due to lack of sanitation and water supply in rural areas. They have to fetch water from far-flung areas, and this results in low education of girl child and other problems related to girl child. So it has been seen, and some studies have concluded, that when water supply is assured in some rural area or village, the education level of especially girls has been elevated. There are issues related to depleting groundwater table because we are using hand pumps only, generally using hand pump in rural areas. And for addressing those issues, we have to educate people about water harvesting as supplement to the present groundwater sources, because most of the Indian areas they receive rain, maybe less or more. So groundwater harvesting can be can be utilized for the purpose of providing water where so clean water is not required, such as washing of household or washing of the clothes, or it can be even used for drinking after filtering and boiling. So a lot of emphasis on this front is required. And one of the most important problem which we are ignoring, that water is becoming law and order problem slowly in towns also, in rural area also. Water scarcity is such a thing that it ultimately becomes a problem of law and order. So it should be solved immediately. Whatever investment or research is required, this is one of the areas of concern presently. The government is trying to solve it, and it has been included as an important component of Bharat Nirman. We hope that this problem will be solved permanently for all the rural people. Next issue is input supply in post-harvest facilities. Input supply is required for all agricultural activities. Seeds, fertilizer, pesticides are the main inputs of agriculture. And post-harvest is storage, market yards, transportation for produce. For all these things, we require sources which can supply genuine products to farmers at reasonable price. And presently the small towns which are located near villages, they are the main source for input supply. Government earlier thought that cooperatives will be good alternative for input supplies, but this was not successful. They supplied inputs in place of cash, and it was treated as a loan, but it has not worked. Similarly, the importance of post-harvest infrastructure is also there, so that in case of good harvest, people may not lose money on account of glut situation or low farm gate prices. Because in absence of buyers, the farmers are compelled to sell their produce at very low price. In farm inputs, we have to find solution for storage and solution for marketing, solution for every storage at every stage, so that the produce does not go waste in absence of storage or processing. Produce is perishable in nature, farm produce is perishable in nature, that is why it requires much skillful handling than any other thing. Another important thing is marketing infrastructure. Marketing infrastructure was developed by state governments through legislative framework, and most of the states have legislative framework for this, and regulated markets are being constructed in every state headquarter, and some of the states have developed in these regulated markets in smaller towns also. These market yards, they play very important place as a hub of activities of in rural area, and they are replacing traditional haats and traditional markets. But the traditional markets are also very important because they do not require space, and people gather at some predetermined place at some predetermined time, and without any infrastructure construction or use of land, they are able to exchange goods sell the excess produce or purchase the input requirement. So these informal markets can also be developed, and people can be put to lot of convenience and benefits by using these traditional markets and hearts. Telecommunication is another important issue. Telecommunication was earlier with the government, and the telephone equipment was considered to be a prized possession, but the sector was liberalized, and after liberalization it is explosive growth in the urban area as well as rural area, and almost 50% of the rural area has been covered. Telecommunication sector is growing very fast in rural area, and especially after the wireless communication or mobile communication, and internet connectivity is the next target in telecommunication. Education is a soft component, health is a soft component, access to technology also, and we have already explained the need for education, the benefits of education, the importance of education, the trained teachers, the school buildings, the consumables, all these things form part of infrastructure for education. For girl child education, especially the rooms, the toilets and the roads going to schools are very important, so that they can reach there safely. Especially the schools which are not having toilets, good toilets, they have a high dropout rate of girl child. It has been seen. So all these aspects are required to be considered at the time of development of educational infrastructure, and much importance should be given to appointment of teachers who are willing to serve in rural areas. Unwilling teachers should not be appointed. Access to technology is the very new area, but it is most important area, because we have come to a point of stagnation in agriculture production. Lot of efforts have been made to increase the agriculture production. Credit have been doubled, thereafter it has been tripled, but there is a stagnation in agriculture production. And now only technological know-how can change this scenario, and increase in the production is required because of increasing population. There is a lot of pressure on land. Every government body, every colonizer, every industry, they want land for one or another purpose. And we cannot deny land to these things for housing, for industrial development. We require land, because for a developed nation, agriculture is one of the activity, and industry is most important activity. So we need infrastructure for agriculture extension, because any money pumped into agriculture and rural development will not be utilized without proper backing of technology. So access to technology should be given to farmers, and whatever is developed in lab, it should reach the farmers, and more and more R&D is required, so that the green technology can be used in farms, and pesticides and other chemical fertilizers can be avoided, because they are being counterproductive. They are reducing the fertility of land, and they are also detrimental to health of the farmer. So we have studied infrastructure in this session, the overview of infrastructure, the importance of infrastructure, the finance source, operation and maintenance of infrastructure, the bodies who provide infrastructure, the role of government, the corporate bodies, the individuals, their contribution to infrastructure development, And in the last, we have learnt about the components of infrastructure which are needed for rural development. These are not conclusive, but they were the important components of the rural infrastructure. And we will also discuss these things in more detail in other sessions. Thank you.